Peter Best, and this is Meet the Expert, the series of podcasts on swine health management in practice, brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim. For this episode of Meet the Expert, we'll be talking about biosecurity on swine farms with Dr. Kristian Havn in Denmark. Dr. Havn is a swine veterinary practitioner with a Porcus practice in Denmark who has pioneered an innovative program to improve biosecurity on the swine farms that he advises. Hello, Dr. Havn. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for letting me be here.
This focus on biosecurity that you've been leading in a particular area of the country, it has a name in Danish that I would find impossible to pronounce. Would you mind pronouncing it for us and telling us what it means in English?
Yeah, I'll give it my best. It's called Porcus Smittestopper. Porcus is obviously our company name, and Smittestopper means basically pathogen stopper.
Now it sounds like SMEDI, but it's not specific to SMEDI viruses, is it?
No, it is not. No,
Okay.
It's not.
So Pathogen Stop, does that suggest any particular pathogen or any infection that could threaten a swine herd?
Originally, the idea was to make a evaluation system on the biosecurity on farm level regarding PRRS virus, but we could quite clear see that it works in all pathogens. So it is also meant to evaluate other pathogens like APP or influenza, mycoplasma, and even ASF.
Really? Has the program already had any successes?
I think at the moment it's too fast to say anything about that. We just started up running the program in our farms 1 month ago. We have done approximately 100 at the time being. But our plan is to evaluate all 1,220 farms that we consult within the next 3 months.
How many farms?
1,220 approximately.
Wow, that's surprising. I hadn't expected you to say it was on that sort of a scale. Good luck with that then. And this is about improving biosecurity. Now I'm going to say I would have thought the Danish pig producers actually were quite well advised on swine health protection, and they were pretty good at keeping their farms biosecure. So why do they need a program that's going to improve it even more?
I think the biosecurity level on most Danish farms are on a fairly high level, but we can see that we have reintroductions of new diseases in some of our farms every year. So something must be it must be able to improve some of the biosecurity levels at certain farms. So. And that's what we invented the program to see if we can do it better in the time to come. And
is it a question of improving biosecurity on individual units or a collection of units? What is the whole idea behind this? Is this an area program or a farm program?
I think the system or the evaluation program is for sure designed to do it on a farm level. What we have seen so far is that the improvements that need to be done on a biosecurity level is very independent from farm to farm. So far, it doesn't make any sense to me that we should do it as an area program. We need to take it from farm to farm and improve it bit by bit. So it's a long way to go if we have to go through 1,220 farms, but that's the right way to do it as I see it.
Now, you said, did you, that it arose out of a program relating to PRRS control? Did I understand you correctly?
Originally, the idea was to improve the PRRS control, yes, but we could clearly see that these biosecurity matters, that goes with all pathogens. So Now we consider it and we ask questions when we evaluate the biosecurity level on the farms. We ask questions about ASF protection. We ask questions about influenza, mycoplasma, APP. So it should, as it is today, pretty much cover all important pathogens.
Yeah. What was the impetus to start? What was the driver that decided you to start Pathogen Stop? Was it doing that PRRS program, or was it something else?
That was also something. I got the idea from the BSEC Gold training course in Iowa State University. Some of our American colleagues, they did a tremendous work in trying to find out if one of their customers or farms that suffered from reinfection. They did sequencing on the PRRS virus and mapping the PRRS virus, and over probably a decade they were able to combine. Every time they had a new breakout, they could pretty much tell from which other farm that virus originated from. And that told me that we have a tradition in Denmark for the last many years that if farms are reinfected with, let's say, PRRS virus, we pretty much blame the weather, or we blame the wind direction or whatever. And it came to my mind that this is a lot more complicated in just base the whole strategy on air transmission of pathogens. It is the wind or the weather that brings the pathogens, and the vehicles and whatever transportation that brings the pathogens into the outside farm area. But there is a great risk that when the pathogens ends up there, people, groceries, material that needs to be brought into the herd area will eventually bring the pathogens from the outside to the inside, which means that it also means that we can actually change that by looking into the everyday routines and improve the biosecurity in that way. So, and that was an idea that I got from the presentations done by the US colleagues in Iowa.
And to evaluate it, how does one evaluate it? Is it some sort of standard examination that you do, or testing, or what are you? How are you on so many farms? How do you begin to evaluate what they're doing already and what they should be doing?
It's actually in that sense pretty simple, because we have I think it's around 75 different questions to them about their routines, everyday routines, how they do this, how do they do that, and we fill in a form. It's an online program, and on the way the program keeps evaluating by, for instance, color. If they have you can say a nice routine from a biosecurity perspective, the answers are colored green, and if there are hazards that we should look into, the color is red. So we can end up with, let's say, 90 or 95%, which is green already, and then we end up with 5 or 10 things that they do that is colored red. And then we go deeper into the routines that they can improve on regarding biosecurity.
Now,
so it's pretty.
Yeah. Who fills out these online surveys? I mean, the owner, the farm manager, or the people who actually do the work?
Actually, the Porcus veterinarian does that, but it's done on a meeting with the farmer and as much as the staff present as possible, because they are the guys that do the everyday routines, and including the routines that might be a hazard due to biosecurity. So we have it. It gives us a good discussion on what is the right thing to do, what is the wrong thing to do, and if we have matters that needs further investigation, you can say. We go in all as a group, we go into the farm area and we ask them to show us, how do you exactly do this or that? And then we come up with suggestions, or the workers, they come up with suggestions how to improve. And so it is also kind of a training program, you can say, because it gives us a good discussion about biosecurity with not only the farmers but also the staff.
May I ask you to generalize about these answers that you got, which I know is unfair, but did it have any common thread in it, these answers, where these areas that are red lighted as being a problem? And was that due to the fact that farms were not regularly revising their biosecurity protocols, or were they just being accidentally not following the rules?
It's probably a combination of many things. Some of it is lack of knowledge. We can have situations where we can say, whoops, are you doing it this way? You need to understand that this is a quite dangerous way to handle, let's say, a sow carcass. And in that matter, they start immediately to change the behavior. So it's in many cases, it's just they don't know that what they are doing is dangerous. And in other cases, they do know that it is dangerous, but the excuses are lack of time or something like that. But if we point this out as a great hazard to their economy, they seem to be very, very motivated actually to get a fresh start on the biosecurity.
So it wasn't really then, Dr. Havn, a situation where they've had the same program in place for years, and they've not revised it and it's become out of date. It wasn't a question of that at all.
It was also a question about that, because they know how to do things in most cases. They just seem to forget, and they need us to, push them forward to renew their whole biosecurity system.
Let me pause for a moment to remind everyone that more information on this conversation, like articles, publications and videos, can be found on the website PRRS.com. So they need their veterinarian, their veterinary advisor, to take stock and fill in that questionnaire, identify the areas which could be improved, and then you sit down with the people and go through those areas in particular, and then invite them to mend their ways. I get that. Now that was the first step, if you like, of your biosecurity program, Pathogen Stop. You did the survey and you've then met the people and suggested what they should do. Then do you follow up every month, or as a group or with individuals? How do you then take it the next steps?
As a minimum, our plan is to renew or re-evaluate the biosecurity plan once every year. But it depends very much on the motivation from farmer to farmer. Some of the farms that I did the evaluation program so far, they asked me to look into it next time, which is normally 1 month later. And we can, if they have, let's say, 5 red spots in their evaluation, we will probably go through these 5 spots one more, and they will be showing me the changes that they did. And if needed, we can make a new evaluation plan, so that our hope is that it turns slowly from red to green over time, and eventually they end up with a 100% green plan or evaluation report. That's our hope, obviously.
Yeah. Let me just take a moment to say to our friends who are listening to this conversation or watching us, thank you for joining us. We're talking to Dr. Kristian Havn, swine veterinary practitioner at the Porcus veterinary practice in Denmark, about a program for biosecurity improvement on over 1,200 swine farms in Denmark. This program, Dr. Havn, when did it start? Did you say how long ago?
We start to use the program here 3 weeks ago, so the first week of January.
I see.
And it took us like 3 to 4 months to develop the program in 2020.
Did you develop the online survey that you've mentioned? Was this an off-the-shelf survey or one that you specifically produced for this purpose?
We got a great help from Boehringer Ingelheim, Denmark. Not only the programming, but also a lot of technical advice on which questions should be asked and all that. So it was like a combined task between Boehringer Ingelheim and Porcus to develop the system.
And how much communication is there between the farms that take part now? That you've gone back to them with their individual red zones and where they could improve. Do you encourage them to communicate with each other? Is that part of the whole exercise, do you think?
So far, I think it's an individual evaluation that is done by one Porcus veterinarian and one farmer, one by one. But I hope that we can do presentations when we have all our farmers together again, when this global pandemic, hopefully is over. And it is our hope that if we do like a common presentation for all our farmers, then we can bring it up to a higher level, like area, or at least that they can advise each other maybe on how to solve specific biosecurity problems, get good ideas from good colleagues and all that.
Yes. You said how many farms. You didn't say how many owners, or at least I don't remember that. Some of these farms were in a multi-farm ownership, were they? So that people from one farm would be moving to the other as a matter of routine, as part of their management. How many owners, more or less, would you say there were involved? 1,000 owners or nothing like that number?
I haven't got the exact number, but a fair guess could be 800.
I'm with you. And this movement between farms under the same ownership, was this something that came out of your survey, or it's a theoretical hazard that you've got more movement of people between farms? Was this so far anything which is, I know it's very early days, but is this something that you think will be highlighted?
It will for sure, because every time you bring in staff from one farm to the next, it is a potential hazard. But everybody knows that we never go back from let's say a weaner stable into a sow herd. We always move forward from the sows to the weaner stables, and from there to the finished stables. So it's like an internal biosecurity, but how we move staff around from farm to farm is just one small thing out of a bigger picture. It's also, do we need to have this or that truck coming into the farm area once per week? That's 52 times per year. Is it possible to do something so that he can only come every second week? Then we have reduced that risk 50%, because now it's 26 times per year. So it's evaluating pretty much all outside contact with the inside herd area that we're trying to reduce to an absolute minimum. And if we have to, which we obviously has to do sometimes, how do we do it in a safe way? But that is not only staff, that is every contact from the outside to the inside area.
Some of these farms, of course, they've been there for a long time. You can't alter their buildings or their environment very easily. Those are the difficult ones to see any improvement in, I would imagine, the older layouts and so on.
I agree, but for now, I'm quite positive, surprised that a lot of this advice that we give on biosecurity, it is not $1 million plans of building new structures or new buildings to overcome the hazards. It is pretty much all of it daily routines on how do we get a dead sow out of the door. If we get delivered sacks with feed stuff, how do we take that into the farm area in a safe way? It's not expensive plans that we are running out. It's pretty much behavior, much of it, and that makes it cheap to change, and it makes it fairly easy to change.
Now, is it also related to herd size, though? I mean, are you going to struggle more with smaller units versus big ones, or you don't think herd size is a factor in this question?
No, I don't. If you bring in the pathogens to the herd area, it might go wrong, whether you have 2,000 sows or if you have 200. But I can maybe see that the bigger farms, the more motivated the farmer seems to be, and that's obviously an economic question, because if something goes wrong on a big farm, the cost is higher than if it goes wrong on a small farm.
But you've picked the right time in a way. You've got coronavirus in the human population. You've got in Europe the March of African swine fever virus. People are more sensitive and more alert on these sort of things, viral infections in particular. Do you find that attitudes have changed because of these events?
Well, maybe. I haven't given it much of a thought, but maybe you're right here, Peter. It seems like everybody, we hear the politicians and everybody talking about washing hands and disinfecting hands all the time on the news and in the newspapers every day. So there is a general understanding that this also goes with pig pathogens. This is not only coronavirus; it's basically the same behavior that we are looking for. So you might be right here, yeah.
Do you expect to be doing more survey form filling online for these farms as a matter of course to be monitoring what they're doing? Do you need to go back and use that survey model in order to examine where they are? Or what will you use as your metrics for how well they are improving?
That's a hard one, because how do we measure that? Because we're not talking about internal biosecurity. This program is designed for external biosecurity improvements, which also means that the only way we can measure if this makes sense is go forward another couple of years or even 5 years, and then try to look back in time and see did we suffer from fewer annual reinfections in, let's say, 1,000 farms than we did the previous 5 years. So it's going to be a tough one, but I can't see that we can measure it in another way.
But you're pretty confident of stopping these pathogens. You're calling it Pathogen Stop, and you think that on many of these farms you're going to be achieving an improvement which will stop the entry, the external biosecurity, to stop the entry of these infections. You're quite confident.
Yeah, well, or at least reducing the number of reinfections per year. I consider every reinfection, I'm trying to consider that to be somewhere in the system we made a mistake. That is probably my viewpoint here. But we never find out where the mistake happened. But we can try to avoid new mistakes from happening in the future. But stopping is probably not the goal. It's more reducing numbers of reinfections per year, which is the main target here.
Will sequencing form a large part, any part at all of the monitoring exercise going ahead? If you do have breakdowns, will you be sequencing to see and the information about the genome of the pathogen?
It's not a very easy option in Denmark, but I think in that matter we can rely very much on the results from United States. They did a great work, and I can't really see why the experience that is done in US cannot be adopted into the Danish way of doing things. But sequencing in Denmark is quite difficult to carry out.
Well, it sounds a very encouraging start that you've made to this, and of course the production economics can only be good if you can achieve any reduction, let alone stopping some of these pathogens. You're going to make a heck of a difference to the economics of those farms. And going forward, you can think about regional or national programs on the same level to put up these barriers against diseases. But for the moment, I'm afraid we have to stop there, Dr. Havn. And I'm going to say many thanks indeed for taking us through this Pathogen Stop program. I'm going to be very interested to hear how that goes as it progresses. But for the moment, I'll say thanks to you, thanks to our viewers and our listeners for joining us. We've been talking to Dr. Kristian Havn of the Porcus swine veterinary practice in Denmark about improving biosecurity on something like more than 1,200 swine farms in Denmark. But for the moment, thank you for joining us, and goodbye. We want to remind you that more information on this conversation, like articles, publications and videos, can be found on the website PRRS.com.